Welcome to our Wednesday talk organized by Brother Yogesh and the Turkish family. And tonight we have with us Brother Neville, and I'm sure everyone knows him. Brother Neville is an author and journalist. He specialized for much of his career in writing about health and medicine, and returned to medical journalism in recent years with a series of articles challenging orthodox approaches to COVID. His books include I Know How to Live, I Know How to Die, The Teachings of Daddy Yankee, and I think most of us have this book, and he had a very close relationship with Daddy Yankee. Another book is Will to Be Well, The Real Alternative Medicine, and the newly published How HIV/AIDS Set the Stage for the COVID Crisis. He was married for 25 years to Liz, also an author and journalist, and the couple have 2 sons and 5 grandchildren. Brother Neville has been a student of Raj Yoga for 40 years and now lives at the Brahma Kumaris Global Retreat Center, Oxford. And the topic for tonight is Inside God's Brain. So, Brother Neville, a very warm welcome with a bouquet of flowers from Izmir and Sister Oslam.
Thank you. They smell beautiful.
Very beautiful. Both the flowers and the sister Oslam, who is Baba's flower from Izmir. Before starting, just a small request, brother, please speak slowly because we have simultaneous translation in many languages. And with a British accent, sometimes the translators find it difficult, but you know how to use your language for translators as well. And also, everyone, if you have any questions, please place your questions on the chat. So, Brother Neville, we will listen to your sharings about Inside God's Brain. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Thanks for the welcome, Maria. And yeah, it's lovely to be with you. I'm back in GRC, and I hope that you'll all be coming here soon too. Been a long haul to get it into shape. It's given some of the residents who are back here a chance to renew themselves as well during this period away from GRC. We got up to all sorts of adventures, some of us, and there's been a lot of growth in these intervening years. So a great building with beautiful renewed 65 bathrooms that got renewed, and including the public ones, and a lovely feel about the whole place of freshness and potential for service, terrific potential now. Always a lot of service happened here, but it's we can see that the need for Baba's vibrations, for Baba's children, for Baba's knowledge is getting more and more intense in the world as things get more and more difficult for people. So if I start speaking too quickly, please intervene. Just say, slow down, Neville, something like that. If you can send me the message, Maria. I do sometimes get carried away. And so I must be careful to bear in mind that the wonderful translators who are changing these words coming in English into your own languages. I was very happy when Yogesh gave me this topic of inside God's brain, partly because over the years, having worked as a medical and science writer, that whole thing of the relationship between the brain and the soul has intrigued me. And generally speaking, I would say we don't think of God having a brain, but he does. Thinking about it, I will offer you this understanding that God is incorporeal, of course, and a brain is corporeal. It's a structure that is made from matter. But God explains that he does take a physical chariot on loan. So we know that Brahma Baba plays a really unique part in the whole of this confluence-aged period. We know that Brahma Baba prepared himself intensely for several years for his brain to be fit for use by the Supreme. Right back from 1932, I think it was, or even earlier, his diaries showed that he was trying to build into himself, to change his consciousness from body consciousness to soul consciousness, practicing all hours of the day. I am a soul. I am an incorporeal being, and I have this material body. He practiced this really intensely for several years, and then there was clearly a lot of power coming through him that led so many to gather round him and want to surrender their lives to this work and this understanding. But even then, in those early years of the Yagya, he didn't have that clarity of distinction between God and his own brain. He didn't realize that he had made his brain available to God. Who would realize that even if you suddenly had a series of visions like Brahma did, you wouldn't think necessarily that God was speaking to you. You'd think that somehow there might be some insight from the divine, but he was still, and they were still, in the understanding of God being an omnipresent energy in those early years of the Yagya. And as time went on, it became more and more clear to him that this was inaccurate, that there was a unique role that he was playing, whereby the qualities and the part that God, the Supreme Being, had to play were going to be made manifest through him. There've been some Murlis recently, haven't there, where he was talking about himself being this special child of God, the only son in that completely pure way. And that is really something well worth pondering on and churning over. Daddy Janki had the experience of God through Brahma to such an extent that she didn't really like to distinguish between the two. But that was from her heart, that was the way she just experienced God. But God using a brain, speaking to them, inspiring them, sharing those vibrations from the ocean of love, from the ocean of peace and happiness, all of that was coming through Brahma, who was a corporeal being. So that's the first point that I'd like to make, that God doesn't have a brain of his own in the same way that he doesn't have a body of his own, but he does have a uniquely prepared and readied chariot, which means the brain and the body, for him to use to begin and continue with playing this very special part that he has at the confluence age. So to know what's inside God's brain, we have some clues, important clues about that, by seeing what went on inside Brahma Baba's brain. And we know about that intense preparation and how he surrendered everything to the mothers. He moved his heart away from all his children, his Lokik children. He mentioned that recently. Again, that's a very special act that was unique to his role, I think. Yes, he does tell all of us that we have to forget this old world, forget these old relations, but it's also within our parts that he says, fulfill your responsibilities to your children, fulfill your responsibilities to those that you're close to, but transform the relationship so that it's not one of attachment, but one of support and sustenance. And that's a long journey that is one that I've been on myself over many years, to change from the neediness that attachment brings. It's a vice, it's you're not free when there's attachment, to a relationship of love with those with whom one is especially close, because love is a giving energy and it's an outflowing, and it doesn't bind, and it doesn't bind you, it doesn't bind others, and it doesn't bind you. But Baba did listen to this instruction that he had to clean his own self so totally, so really, it did take a few years, but he did it so totally that his brain became available for God to use by his leaving his old attachments, by his gradually working towards that incorporeal consciousness and the viceless consciousness, which means nothing holding you, nothing pinning you down, just able to live moment by moment in the present moment, not worrying about past or future, and moving towards that egoless state where Baba, as Daddy Kumarka once said, he drew God's love and wisdom into himself without seeking any recognition for himself. He was always Karan Karavan Ha. He was attentive and diligent and totally successful in being Karan Karavan Ha. That's why Daddy Ji was remembering him that way, that he didn't try to draw people to himself. It was always, yes, to tell the children, I am that chariot for that one, but the attention was always to go to that one that was beyond, but that was there in front of them using that brain. So this is actually quite a subtle matter, but immensely important and quite inspiring to think about how Brahma Baba prepared himself like that so that his brain could be used by Shiv Baba. And then, as I was mentioning, there were such powerful thoughts and feelings emerged from the ocean of love and knowledge, urging us to move in the same direction. And exactly how we live that out is dependent on each one of us, on our individual parts. I often think about what it means to follow the Father. And I think, I probably had a rather gross idea about it some years back, thinking, oh, well, Baba just surrendered and, he had this part where he could be in a community that was separate from the rest of the world. And he just focused on study and yoga and inspiring the children. And of course, that was a wonderful part, but it's not the same for each one of us. When I came into Gyan, I was married with children and they were halfway through their childhood, and those responsibilities had to continue for some years. And similarly with the newspaper work, that has been an important part of my own life journey, learning how to make contributions from that professional side, but steadily removing the ego from them, so that could be part of this flow of, and that I could make myself at least move in the direction of making myself an instrument for Baba's task. But it's not going to be that following the Father means that I do exactly the same as him, because each one of us is in different circumstances. However, I am going to go on, as you'll see, to offer the thought that we can, in a sense, we can sometimes be a part of the extended brain of God as well. And I'll kind of find my way to that thought as we go forward. I liked it the other day when Baba said, no matter how much I have to tolerate, I'm still present on your service. And it was actually Shiv Baba who said that. And it makes you wonder. We generally don't think of God having to tolerate anything because he's so knowledgeable and so beyond, but he was there. He had this brain. He could see the struggles, that the one that he was sitting beside, Brahma Baba, and the children, the things that they were going through. And so even though when he says he had to tolerate these things, I don't think it would mean that he suffered. I don't think God can suffer, but nevertheless, he needed strength. He was talking about that as like a virtue, tolerance as a virtue that had to be expressed to the full, a virtue that had to be expressed to the full in order for that tolerance to work and to allow Brahma to equally to stay beyond, even though awful things were happening sometimes to the sisters and to the Yagya even. So God, it's easy for us to understand, leaving aside the question of a brain, it's easy for us to understand that God has a purpose. It's clear. He explains what his purpose is. He explains that he comes when he sees that suffering has reached a pretty extreme level. And he knows that things are on the edge, that they're on the edge of collapse, that there will be suffering without cause, as he sometimes uses that expression, and that he has this purpose of creating the consciousness that will bring the new world, which he knows is there waiting, but the consciousness has to be of all within the human family. Consciousness has to be there for that world to return. And so his purpose is very strongly focused on the Brahmin family. Yes, he's here to relieve suffering for the whole human family, but many, as we know, many billions will return to the home, and that will ultimately be part of God's mercy because things will be getting so difficult. But the creation of the consciousness for the first half of the cycle, where that heavenly state of humanity is present, that's central to his purpose. And so he uses Brahma's brain for that, very definitely. He says he's teaching his Brahmin children how to restore their original sanskars. He's teaching his Brahmin children how to restore their original sanskars. That's a central part of his purpose, and that affects each one of us. What a beautiful thing that he's got this aim, that he's reaching out to us to encourage us to continue with that job of emerging the original purity that is the root of our humanity. Humanity in the sense where he uses the word charitable, that we're all charitable in in the Golden Age. It's not like we have to contribute to charities for poor people, but we just have no neediness on our own part. We're only radiant. We're like beautiful flowers with the fragrance of our virtues just being shared one with another. What a world. And very, very, it sounded like a fairy tale to me when I first heard about it, but now that I've been following this path for many years and I've seen the change in myself and in many others moving towards that state of charitableness. So this is central part of what he's doing. He says, so he said the other day, you, my children, are dearer than life itself. Oh, isn't that fantastic? You, my children, are dearer than life itself. And it's not a sentimental thing on his part. He's explaining that we're really important to him and his task, because we're the ones who are going to help guide the world through the difficult times that lead to destruction, and then that need to have in place the consciousness where we come as the deities. And so that's why, in a sense, he almost means it literally, that normally we think of life as being such a priority, such a total priority over everything, we would often feel. And yet we're dearer than life itself, because life as we've known it in the depths of Kali Yuga, in the Ravan's kingdom, has to finish ultimately. And we have to let go of it in order to be able to return into heaven. And it's by giving us, this is all what's in his brain. Through Brahma, he knows that he has to introduce himself. He has to show to us what he is and what's been going on, because that's what allows us to develop the power to change our sanskars, to see that underneath the limitations there is that original beauty. It's a lot he asks of us, because he really is asking us to let go of everything, and yet still see where our old sanskars of limitation are present by staying in everyday circumstances. Hope that I didn't go too quickly through that bit. Okay. With Brahma Baba having such a special role, what does it mean now that he's gone? Okay, there was Avyet Baba, but that wasn't where Shiv Baba was there with the children, showing through the brain of Brahma what Shiv Baba wanted to inspire them to do. Now, how do we know what's in God's brain? How can we really know what's inside? Well, definitely the Murli is the most wonderful thing. I find that the Sakar Murlis are an absolute inspiration. From having hardly been able to understand a word when I started, I was just drawn by the vibrations, and the knowledge wouldn't fit my poor stone intellect. But now I feel the magic of those Sakar Murlis, how they just kind of color us. I only have to expose myself to some extra study, and any kind of gray patches dissipate, any clouds quickly dissipate. I've found that this is a most wonderful thing. The Murlis really do, they sort of bypass normal everyday thought processes, and he comes to us in so many different directions, just feeding us with colors almost, so that our consciousness can change as we listen and listen and listen. This is a wonderful thing. That's still with us. So we we're inside God's brain as we hear him speaking to us through the Murli. But I think there's more than that. And it's wonderful with regard to the Murli that the last 5 years were kept. What a brilliant thing, because that was when the knowledge was at its most clear and the Murli at its most powerful. But his work goes beyond the Murli. He said recently, I have to adopt very many forms. I have to adopt very many forms. I ignite the light of many. So, you know, I think that means, frankly, and it's dangerous territory because we know how wrong it is to think of God being omnipresent. No way in Ravan's kingdom. But I do think that as each one of his children, his Brahmin children, moves towards the cleanliness and the letting go of everything that Brahma set such an example of, still doing things here, but internally having let go, not being bound by everything, having developed that incorporeal, viceless and egoless consciousness, moving towards that, to the degree that each one of us makes progress in that direction, then I feel that we become like a part of God's extended brain. This is Quran Karavan Ha, you know. Baba can use us. He can guide us as to how to act if we have that cleanliness whereby what needs to happen in the drama and what he wants to happen in the drama, we are aligned with that. This is a lovely idea. Don't know what wise souls like Yogesh would think about it, but this was what I felt, that his work goes beyond the Murli. And actually, very interestingly, he said today that when sannyasis say that each soul is the supreme soul, he said that is like the Ganges flowing backwards. Interesting. Because a river comes from a source and it flows, and it widens, and eventually it reaches the sea. And so a river is like that. So the Ganges of knowledge is like that. It came from a source, and it flowed through the Brahmaputra, through Brahma, and it flowed into the daddies, and they, to their different degrees, in the way I'm putting this, became a part of God's brain, because those of us lucky enough to have known the daddies saw divinity, and they were human, they made mistakes, but they had a tremendous humility and clarity that allowed them to serve divine purpose. Now, I think it can go beyond the daddies, because you might say, okay, well, supposing the daddies were a part of God's brain, or at least an extension of it, but they're gone now, merely. We've got Daddy Ratan Mohini still. Wonderful to meet her and see her in Madhaban. But for the most part now, those daddies, those incredible instruments who took so much from Shiv Baba through Brahma, they're no longer with us. So can we be threads of God's brain? I think we can. I think it takes dedication, it takes Srimat, following Srimat as more and more intensely. It takes study, it takes letting go, it takes fulfilling our responsibilities, not in a sense of responsibility, just knowing that karmically our learning is going to be greatest as we, instead of running away from difficult situations, we bring power into them to transform them. All of this is what God wants. And although no way can we say that we're God, But I do feel that this river that is growing bigger as the confluence age moves towards its climax, I do feel as if divinity is spreading. And as he said, that, what was that expression I used? I made a note of it. He said that I have to adopt very many forms. I ignite the light of many. So that's kind of that's implying it's not that he enters them in the same way that he enters Brahma, but his energy is reaching out. They become instruments. This is what Quran, Karab and Har is all about. We have to become instruments in God's orchestra. You may prefer that metaphor to being part of his brain, but I hope you're seeing what I mean. So we can't, a river flows from its source to the sea. And to say that souls are the supreme is to pretend that we're still pure, that we're still in the home. That's not possible. That's what he said. That is like the Ganges flowing backwards. It's not possible. Okay, yes, sometimes a strong fish might find its way upriver, reverse something, but the overall trend of a river is one direction from the source to the sea. So you see this kind of mistake that the Ganges, that the sannyasis made in thinking that they were God, that they could renew themselves by thinking that they were God. No, the river has to continue its flow, and the cycle has to end. We have to keep moving with that. But what we have to do is step out of the flow now that it is a very polluted river, and the way Baba puts it, sit at the foot of the kalpa tree. That's also what Brahma did. He stepped out of what had become this polluted river, the flow of consciousness in these end times. He stepped out of that and sat at the root of the tree, drawing on God's power, sitting with the seed, putting this new energy into the human family. And I think we can do the same. That's what we're being urged to do. To step out of Ravan's kingdom and absorb the knowledge that comes from God's brain that enables us to return home. So we've got this knowledge through the Murlis. We've got seniors who tell us about their experience of this path. And all of that is actually, in a way, that is allowing us to know God's brain. So my sense is that there is a fresh river flowing from the seed through Brahma to the daddies and senior yogis, and that I can actually nourish myself through that alternative flow, that I am within the old world still, but the more I kind of only pay lip service to that, develop that disinterest for it, it doesn't mean leaving it, but that my real underlying incognito aim is to connect to this fresh flow of truth, then I'll never be God, but my brain can also serve God to the extent that I surrender my limited self. And I love that idea. I think then powerful things can happen when we do become available in that way. And that's probably the ultimate in knowing what it feels like of being inside God's brain. If we can experience the cleanliness and flow of being available for Baba and his task, then the happiness and ease and charitableness and truth present in our lives will really align us with Baba. We'll have that experience of the divine purpose inside ourselves, influencing our own brain function. Anyway, those were the thoughts that I had, and I think perhaps this connects, just for a final word or two, in this analysis. Daddy Janki said something quite wonderful, just perhaps a year or two before she left the body. She said the entire work of the Brahma Kumaris is all about the head and the heart. And she meant it physically. You know, when I came to Baba, I thought, oh, you know, you're a soul, forget you, but see the distinction, and you practice soul consciousness, because that separation is vital if we are to know God and contribute to this renewal that God is implementing. But at the end of her life, Daddy was saying that this spiritual university is there to renew head and heart, and she was experiencing that. So she said, this heart of mine is filled with happiness. And she meant this physically, she put it down. This heart of mine is filled with happiness. And this head and brain, so it's not a metaphor, this head and brain are cool. She used that word. So having become, having drawn so much on God's love and wisdom all her life, she had reached that stage where she felt as though her own brain was so full of truth that it could function close to how, she would never say this, but it was functioning very close to how God's was. And she did say she felt she was a companion of God, and that her heart was so filled with happiness, so full, because of a life well led and being able to serve God's purpose so well, that it was filled with happiness. So this is a kind of, sometimes we think that we don't make the connection between the incorporeal, the soul, and the supreme, and the material, but actually we're not sannyasis, we're not just taking ourselves off to the Brahma element, we're learning how to feel that we've got God with us here in these brains and bodies, which I think is great, because it means that we stay alive even though we're dying. I don't want to die yet. I mean, when I leave this body, okay, fine. But I love life too, thanks to Baba, because, go back 40 years, which is a long time, as Yogesh was, as Maria was saying. I really didn't think I would live for long at that time, because life felt so confusing. But now, life is so lovely. And it's thanks to really the love and wisdom, from God's heart, you could say, because that vibrated through Brahma Baba and through the daddies, but also from God's brain, the Murli and the ocean of knowledge that the daddies became. So anyway, that's what I wanted to put on the table, and I think there's an opportunity for questions, isn't there? Are you there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much for the sharing. It was really very deep, and many points are very nice and interesting, and especially when you talked about the daddies and also how Baba's brain is Daddy's brain as well. It's part of Baba's brain.
Kind of extension, yes. Yeah.
Yes, this is very nice. And I don't see any questions, but I have one question here. Can you share a few more things about the Daddy Yankee?
Yeah, well, what I so love about this family and the leadership that we knew through the daddies is the individuality that is flourished, emerged, not suppressed on this path. So the top daddies, the senior daddies, were so distinctive. And we've got Daddy Gulzar, who, as Gopal Bai, who was her kind of support and right hand for many decades, knew her so well from early days in Delhi. He said, she is not of this world. She has never been of this world. So she had that unique role. And then you had Daddy Ji, who took over with so much love and skill the yagya that had been founded by Brahma Baba. Brahma Baba, that creative genius on God's behalf, who brought the yagya into being, and then Daddy Ji, who nurtured it with love so that it grew and established itself and became stronger. And then Daddy Janki, to me, she was more like Brahma Baba in the sense that she was spiky and fierce, as well as loving and powerful. She was an empire builder. She wanted people who could be pillars around the world, so that the souls of the world would have a chance to connect with this truth that she had received from God and that she found so valuable in her own life, and that she wanted many others to be able to take benefit from. And so that dedication to the task of building the infrastructure where there was nothing previously outside India, she was the pioneer for that. And it was a particular personality that allowed her to do that. Absolute courage, tremendous courage in the face of so many things that could have finished off a lesser soul. And I just always found her, there's something, even though I often got the bony finger, she was always telling me off about my stone intellect and various, she would always take the opportunity to tell you off, but it never felt, to me, it never felt like criticism, more like inspiration. And I found it funny and loving in a way. She did set some wonderful examples to us of how to behave. I've got one story that I probably told, you may have heard it before, about an occasion when I felt really hurt and drove down to London early one morning to say that about this episode that had happened. And I said it was like a dagger in my heart. And she just, instead of going into the ins and outs of it, like, oh, I didn't mean anything, or don't be so silly, or don't understand, nothing of that. She just said, pull it out. Pull it out. so why bother with fussing around, hurts? Just pull it out. And I did. That was the end of it. But not the end of the lesson, Things like that, they really stick in your mind and hugely valuable for helping one through the challenges that come on this journey.
Okay, thank you. Brother Yogesh, he says, God calls himself the comforter of hearts and also the intellect of the wise. How have you experienced these titles in your own life?
Mm. When I came to Baba, those vibrations of even in new BKs, like there might be a sister who'd been studying this just for a couple of years, but there was a different vibration from that of Kali Yuga. It's this word charitable, you know, where they're not manipulating you, but they're just they've got more genuine concern for you than is the case generally in the world, except of course within close relationships, which have that selfish element in them anyway, you know, like my child, my husband, my house. Those things motivate us, and there's that element of charitableness within a limited range. But this was something deeper. This was a soul charitableness and or soul conscious power. And even new Brahmins have got some of this. And it was this, plus experiencing it from seniors in London, that comforted my heart, because it's a vibration of truth that when your heart is hurting because you've been ignorant about how to live your life properly, this healing, accepting, loving energy is the comforter of hearts. It's coming from the comforter of hearts. So that was from that side. But then the intellect of the wise is what I've been trying to share with this kind of thing about God's brain, because I feel that it's this they go together actually. As we become the embodiment, more and more the embodiment of the knowledge, wisdom begins to return to the soul. We can stay cool, as I said, Daddy Janki said of her brain, her head and brain, and we can be powerful because we can see the way things are going, and we can know that come what may, if I'm doing something with a clean motivation, the outcome doesn't matter too much. Of course, it's nice if what you have in your conscious intention happens, but if your motive is really clean, so that you're just doing your best, then even if the outcome that you hoped for doesn't happen, you still have that tolerance that Baba mentions that he has, meaning that you're not going to be destroyed by failure or disappointment or disillusionment. You've got that wisdom inside you. And so this is where I feel that, again, coming from God, through Brahma, through the daddies, through the seniors, and gradually penetrating even a stone intellect like mine, you know, I just see the beauty that brings to my life. One of the reasons that I came out of retirement as a journalist, even though I'm kind of pretty well past retirement age, was a feeling that I had something to offer through my past experience, and that it would also be an opportunity for me to see if I could do this work with less of that expectation, ego involvement, frustration, ups and downs that used to be a part of my daily life in the newspaper world. Just to sort of see if I could make the effort to study and share, and then hand it out, and then it's up to the drama what happens. And so it's been very helpful so I do feel as if the intellect of the wise has been nourishing me over these years, and that it's made a difference to my own ability to interrelate with the wider world.
Yes, there are some questions here. Is God logical?
Well, I don't think he's illogical. So I guess he must be logical, but not logical in a linear sense. You know, the Sakar Mulis, in a way, they have their own internal logic, but the way Baba teaches is, I feel it's more like throwing daubs of paint at our intellects and hearts. He comes and, you know, he'll tell us, you know, you Trikaldashi, you can see where you're going, you can see where you came from, this is how you were originally. Then he'll jump across to something about Krishna and the mistakes that are present within the sannyasis traditions, or how the religions when they began had strength but now they've lost it. All these different things, he doesn't unfold them in a conventional logical way, but there's an internal logic to them, that they're all directed towards giving our intellects the understanding that will allow us to stay cool no matter what happens. That's the goal. Still some way away in my case, but you know, getting there much better than used to be the case.
Hey, there are so many questions here. What is the purpose of this whole system? I mean, why humanity and world or earth exist?
I think you might have to go deeper inside God's brain than I've been yet to answer that one. But my guess is that it's the beauty of, it's like a giant game of hide and seek. Play is wonderful. Baba calls this a play. It's a giant game of hide and seek. We come, we experience this material world with that original cleanliness of spirit that allows us to live in heaven and be heavenly with one another, deities. That's the beginning. This beautiful world because of our cleanliness. Never mind golden palaces and all that. Yes, probably. But the real beauty of heaven is the cleanliness in our spirit, not needing anything because of the fullness, the freedom from the vices which bind us. You know, they're like a woodworker's vice. It's a grip. It stops us from fulfilling our potential, from moving on, from being present in the moment and experiencing the absolute joy of life, which is present in the golden age. So it's kind of like spirit experiencing itself through matter. That's perhaps the purpose of this whole game, because if we were just consciousness, spirits in that state of potential, we would never know what the potential was, what it looked like. And yes, okay, there's a period where suffering increases because of the growth of ignorance, the loss of clarity, the loss of generosity of spirit. That's part of the game. But then, you know, it's hide and seek. You do become lost, and then you become found again, and you have the joy of being refound, and the game's over, and you go home tired, have a rest, go and play again. It's like, I suppose one way of answering the question would be to say, there is the seed and there is the expression. So the purpose is the expression of what is in the seed. And all the potential that is for this drama that is there in that incorporeal reservoir of truth becomes played out here in this material world, remembering that consciousness is primary. It's something that scientists are beginning to grasp, that consciousness is primary, the material world is secondary. It's like a projection of consciousness. It's a huge play, and it's just it only gets, I think the question about why should it be there arises when we've been through some tough patches. You know, we feel as if this is not such a good game, but actually it really is a good game. And we must just listen to what he's telling us, lift ourselves out of, take the dagger out of the heart, let the heart heal, start practicing, even enjoying here at the end of Kali Yuga, that freedom that comes as we follow Srimat and study and renew ourselves through yoga with that one.
Okay. We don't have so much more time because we would like to. Okay, one more question. What about God's mind?
Yeah, I think that Baba explains very clearly that the mind and the intellect are within the soul. So they are capacities that exist within the seed. When those capacities are expressed in the material world, they become brains and feelings, emotions, but the incorporeal is the source of those feelings and intentions and purposes and roles. So God's mind is that reservoir that has there the part and the purpose and the intentions and the power that we were talking about as expressing itself through God's brain. So the brain is the material instrument through which what is in God's mind becomes expressed.